Welcome everybody to the game analysis of game number 12, the last classical game in the World Chess Championship 2018, and the score was even before the game. That means whoever wins this one becomes world champion. If it's a draw, it goes to the tiebreak. So let's get started. Caruana with the white pieces against Magnus Carlsen, and once again 1e4, once again the Sicilian, and for the third time in a row Caruana goes for the open Sicilian, and we see once again this fashion configuration with 5e5. Now knight db5, d6, and once again this move, 7 knight d5, and now instead of knight b8, which was Carlsen's choice in his last two black games, he goes knight e7, which is the other main move in this position, c4, and here with c4, white supports the pawn on d5 as well as prepares to bring the queen out to a4. In fact, if black goes a6, he would be in a lot of trouble already. After queen a4, the threat of knight takes d6 or knight c7 checkmate is difficult to parry, since bishop d7 would lead to a beautiful mate here on d6. And if you take the knight, you lose material because the rook is undefended. So this is why black instead goes knight g6, because now after queen a4 he can put the bishop in between as the pawn on d6 is defended. Now queen b4 played, hitting the pawn, black moves the bishop out of the way, and h4 played with the obvious idea to threaten the knight on g6, which is not really having too many good squares. h5 was a new move here in this position. It is quite a logical move to stop h5 from white beforehand. Mostly a6 has been played, but this seems to give white an advantage. So h5 played, and now Caruana went queen a4, threatening once again discovered check, so bishop d7 is forced, queen b4 back, bishop goes to f5, and now would Caruana repeat moves here and seal the draw and go to the tiebreaks, or would he play on? That was the big question, and Caruana played on. Bishop e3. The critical move here must be bishop to g5. But probably Caruana did not want to test exactly what Carlsen had prepared in this variation. I'm supposing that Carlsen wanted to go queen b8 because bishop e7 is no good, white takes, and now the king has to take to defend the pawn on d6. White can push c5 immediately. This looks rather bad for black. And f6 is also somewhat awkward. Now the bishop goes back to e3. And, well, this pawn move didn't really help black. Quite the opposite. So probably queen b8 was his intention. And now, let's say queen a5, provoking b6, queen a4, bishop to d7. And this seems to be quite a normal position. Maybe white is a bit better, but nothing much has happened here. Caruana went bishop e3. Now a6 played. The pawn was under attack after all by bishop and knight. It is possible to sacrifice it with a move like bishop e7, but it feels like Carlsen wanted to play it safe here. Knight to c3. Once again, a sacrifice of this pawn would be possible with bishop e7, but again, Carlsen didn't feel like sacrificing any material, and he doesn't have to. Now g3 was played. This takes away the f4 square as well as protects the pawn on h4. Bishop e7, and here a normal development move like bishop e2 or bishop g2 would have been also quite fine. Caruana plays f3, which is interesting. He wants to bring the knight to e4, but on the other hand he also weakens his pawn structure quite a bit on the king side, so a double-edged move. Knight f4 is a nice maneuver by Carlsen. The knight was not so well placed on g6 anymore, and he brings it to d7. Knight e4, knight to d7, and bishop d3. Black castles, and here Caruana surprised pretty much everybody with his next move. He played the move rook to h2. And most likely this is not a great move. It has a very interesting idea. It prepares the queenside castle, and then the rook is supposed to swing over to c2 to stop a b5 break here. But the king is not that safe on the queenside, and probably a move like castle would have been better. Let's say black goes bishop g6, white brings back the queen. Black can go f5 here, white puts the knight on g5, and again it's quite a double-edged position. Black can take on g5 and white takes back. There are breaks such as e4 in the position, knight c5. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? Obviously white could also take with the bishop on g5. Many options and a dynamically balanced position. After rook h2 already, black is a bit better. So now Carlsen goes rook ac8 first of all. And now we see the point. If now black goes b5, then white would be happy because he can react with rook c2 and threaten to take on b5 next. So this was the whole idea behind Caruana's mysterious rook maneuver. He wanted to prevent b5 from happening, which is a typical break for black. Carlsen instead realized what he needs to do here and played a very strong move, bishop to g6, preparing f5. He goes for the other typical play in this kind of position with f5 and then something like e4, f4. Rook to c2, f5, and here Caruana makes a mistake. He retreats to f2. He needs to go forward, but also this is risky for white. Black takes on g5. White has to take with the pawn. If bishop takes, there's knight c5, and this is quite unpleasant already, because if this bishop disappears, then the bishop on g6 becomes very strong. So has to take with the pawn here, theoretically. This is not a game. And now there's e4 pushing. If white takes this, then next the knight will appear on e5, possibly on d3, supported by the bishop. Black gets a strong passed pawn. Not so pleasant. And if white goes bishop f1, black can open his diagonal by sacrificing a pawn with f4, and not pleasant to play against this bishop here. The knight is well placed. Possibly white is okay, but in a practical game, I would not like to play this with white. But it was still better than knight f2, because here black gets even more of an upper hand. Knight c5, logical and good move, threatening to take on d3, followed by f4. And this is why Caruana goes f4 himself, which is another mistake. He needs to take this knight. He needs to take it off. If the queens come off, white would be happy because in general his king is less safe. So d takes c5 is probably best, and then play something like bishop f6. And this is also better for black, but it's a question how much. His bishops are well placed. He has a potential break here with b5. So it seems that the white king is a bit less safe. On the other hand, white also has this protected passed pawn on d5. So this is a full fight ahead. After f4, it could get really dangerous for white here if black finds some ideas connected with the break b5. But Carlsen did not do that. He played a5. He took the positional approach. The direct b5 is quite interesting. First, the point is white cannot take. That would lead to disaster if knight takes d3 check and the rook is undefended. So bishop e2 is in order, and now there's the idea of a5. If white takes on b5, there's bishop e8 trapping the queen. And after the queen goes back to e1, black can play b4, has an idea of b3. This looks very attractive, but maybe white can get out of here by taking on c5, playing knight to d3. Now queen e3 seems very logical with check. King b1, e4 also seems quite logical, and white can trade queens. And I think this helps him a lot. And the position has a rather closed character now, so maybe white can survive here and set up somewhat of a fortress. I'm not quite sure, but this is maybe the best he can get in that variation, which already tells you it's not so great. And in fact, I think black can do it better. He can take on f4 first. Now white has to take with the bishop, which he doesn't want to, but if he takes with the g-pawn, then he just loses this pawn and he's a pawn down. So he has to take with the bishop, and this means later on this bishop can still become active if white moves the bishop on f4. And now b5. I think this is the right move order, and here white is in trouble. I mean, if bishop e2 now, or let's say bishop f1, then once again this push a5 followed by b4, ideas with b3. Now the rook, the e file is open, the position in general is more open. The bishop cannot take on c5 anymore, obviously. I mean, practically this looks absolutely horrible. Also same here with queen d2. This is the computer move. Bishop f6. It also is very easy to play, and taking this pawn. I just cannot believe any of that. The rooks come to the open files here in b8, a8, the bishop in f6. It looks, a practical game, fairly impossible to defend. So I think e takes f4 and b5 would have posed huge problems to white here, especially considering Caruana also did not have that much time left. Instead, Carlsen played a5 and took the positional approach, now closed down the position, and he is better here. But now with the position being rather close, black cannot get this break in so easily on b5, and white can take his time to consolidate. So king b1 is a good move now. There's a threat of bishop a4. And if b3, then bishop takes b3. So king b1 stops that. Bishop f6. The bishop is well placed. Now rook to e1. Once again, there was the threat of, or the idea of bishop a4, and Caruana just wants to take this out of the position. Also possibly prepare something like knight d1, knight c3. a4. Now queen to b4. g6. Logical move to defend the pawn h5. Rook d1 back to prepare bishop d4 and trade this very well placed bishop on f6. And now Carlsen played rook a8, and a huge surprise happened. He offered a draw with this move, which Caruana accepted. So we go to the tiebreaks. And why it's a huge surprise? Because black is not risking anything in this position. He is better. The question is just how much and if he can get anything tangible, but he's never in any risk of losing, certainly. Still, Carlsen probably felt that rather playing 4 rapid games than playing it out in this game would give him better chances. Or maybe he just didn't believe that there was too much in this position to play for and rather want to not be too exhausted and play the rapid. This was his plan, I guess, all along. In this game, he was fine with a draw, obviously, with the black pieces, and now he was fine to offer it here and then play the tiebreaks. So somewhat of an escape for Caruana. There was this period in the game where it could have gotten really dangerous, especially talking about these b5 ideas where black gets some strong play and practically it's very difficult to defend, I think. But Carlsen was not in the mood for that. He played the positional approach, shut it down, and we are going to the tiebreaks on Wednesday. So tomorrow's the rest day. Then tiebreaks, 4 rapid games. If it's still drawn, then 2 blitz games. If it's still drawn, Armageddon game. That means white gets more time, like 5 minutes against 4, and white needs to win. If black draws or wins, then he gets the title. Let's hope it doesn't come down to that. That would be a little bit too crazy, but we'll see the action on Wednesday. Hope you enjoyed the analysis. If you did, make sure to subscribe and let me know if you have any questions. See you soon. Bye bye.